It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
The stock market continues to hover at record highs, even as economic and environmental collapse are both in free fall. Endless money printing to pacify first world populations till the brutal, bitter end. This is Dane Wigington, host of GeoengineeringWatch.org's commercial-free Global Alert News Hour. News that none of us wish was so, but that we need to know if we're to have any chance of changing course. As converging calamities continue to close in from every direction. First headline, Pfizer's own CEO says he will wait to get a COVID-19 vaccine and says company executives won't, quote, cut the line either. In other words, they don't want their vaccine either. From that report, Pfizer's CEO, Albert Bourla, has not taken the COVID-19 vaccine his company developed alongside BioNTech, another company. Just being good Samaritans, right? These CEOs and company executives are just passing their doses on of the experimental concoction to the public for the greater good, right? Really? Is that what you really think is going on? Do you really think that the people that run these medical industrial complex criminal cabals are really concerned about populations? If for any who do any real in-depth research about the entire history of vaccinations going back many decades, all the way back to the blanket legal immunity that these companies, all of them, enjoy for any death and injury their concoctions cause, that's not concern for the public welfare. They're not taking their COVID-19 vaccines. Think about that. So, in regard to the expanding smorgasbord of COVID-19 concoctions, is the public really that anxious to get their dose? Not so much. And that trend is increasing. On that note, consider this headline that shows very clearly how desperate those in power are to make sure that the public is forced to accept their jab. From IsraelNationalNews.com, this new headline, quote, "We won't force vaccine, but here's what we will do," end quote. The report states that in order to, quote, motivate vaccine compliance, you won't be able to, quote, buy, sell, or trade without the vaccine, end quote. Yes, unless you have submitted to one of the warp speed medical industrial complex concoctions, the controllers have plans for you. Aren't they desperate for us all to accept their witch's brew? In the meantime, the following recent headline or question from Christianity Today, something to consider. Is COVID-19 vaccine the mark of the beast? End headline. A question that we will each have to answer for ourselves. Another headline from multiple sources. 87,000 Dutch nurses refuse to be COVID-19 vaccine guinea pigs. End headline. Another headline from multiple sources. World's largest vaccine maker suing man for saying COVID-19 vaccine injured him. This is the Serum Institute in India and AstraZeneca. So consider that no matter how severe a vaccine injury is or death, we, the public, are not allowed to sue the vaccine manufacturers. But if you simply accuse them of harming you, they can sue you. How absurd is this entire equation? How insane is this entire equation? And how long will the public go along with this, pretending that if they do, somehow their life will, quote, get back to normal? Not going to happen. The former paradigm is done. I can't stress that strongly enough. It's done. The sooner we face that, the sooner we face the future that is unfolding, the more likelihood we have of possibly altering it for the better. Another headline, founder of vaccine safety website, ex-pharma insider found dead. Is that really a surprise? From that headline, she stated this. This is a direct quote from this ex-pharma insider that was just found dead. Her name is Brandy Vaughn. She wrote, "If something were to happen to me, it's foul play, and you know exactly who and why," end quote. The list of sudden and unexpected deaths among those that dare to try and expose the crimes of the medical industrial complex is long and growing. And this question needs to be asked. How many who blindly and obediently serve the medical industrial complex are actually in their own way, playing the part of a modern-day Joseph Mengele by pushing and propagating proven harmful treatments because doing so provides them the paychecks and pensions they feel they need to preserve their personal paradigm, to preserve their part in the matrix. How many are playing this part? And if you're not aware of exactly who Joseph Mengele was, please take the time to look him up. Joseph Mengele. Learn more. And we have many Joseph Mengeles now in the modern medical industrial complex. On the subject of the medical industrial complex's unthinkable deceptions and ongoing crimes against humanity, starting with what's being done to our children, I will hope that all listening to this broadcast will take the time to search the following title online. Quote, Dr. Larry Palevsky, MD, Connecticut testimony. Palevsky is Palevsky. Please search and watch this 28-minute testimony in front of a governing board in Connecticut. It is extraordinarily important and powerful, factually presented, indisputable facts, very articulately presented. Please take the time to watch and share this testimony online. And all the while, as populations are being subjected to orchestrated political theater, orchestrated societal polarization and division in the entire CV-19 scenario, the bottom line of biosphere collapse looms over us. Global climate engineering operations are further fueling that overall trajectory. And for the record, though we can for now refuse the needle, we must breathe. How can we know on any given day the totality of what the atmospheric aerosol spraying aircraft are dispersing into our skies? What we already know from extensive lab testing from all over the world is bad enough. And on any given day of their choosing, if the mix is altered, the controllers could level the field. We desperately need a critical mass of the population to wake up, to look up, and to face reality. And again, this warning, brace for impact. It's coming and accelerating, and has already been stated so many times on the Global Alert News broadcast. The entire CV-19 scenario is the controller response to unfolding climate and environmental collapse. The controllers are not going to stop. They're not going to refrain. The background of this climate and environmental collapse is driving their desperation, exactly as geoengineeringwatch.org has stated would happen for over a decade. The power structure, which includes controllers from countries all over the world, will continue to do everything in their power to prevent populations from even looking at the wider horizon, let alone responding to it, until the last possible moment. And that moment draws nearer by the day. What methods are the controllers using to hide the horizon from public view? The scripted theater of mass distraction is one way. Again, the political mass distraction, polarization, and societal division. Total censorship is another method that is being used. This quote from Potter Stewart, censorship reflects a society's lack of confidence in itself. We are there. On that note, this new headline report, Google hit with its third antitrust lawsuit since October, this time by a bipartisan coalition of states. Along with Facebook, Google has certainly done their part to cover the tracks of countless power structure crimes, haven't they? Past and present. Not just CV-19 related issues, but also on the climate engineering assault. All too often, critically important information that the public has every right to know is simply deleted from Google searches. A reminder of this case in point, approximately 1 year ago, geoengineeringwatch.org was deleted by Google under any search of the geoengineering term. To add more clarity to their crime of censorship in this case, geoengineeringwatch.org went from the top of the first page when searching the geoengineering term to being disappeared from 20 pages on the subject overnight. Geoengineeringwatch.org was formerly the top of the first page of the geoengineering term search because our site rankings rightfully put us there with over 36 million visitors to date and counting. But Google didn't want the public to find the data from geoengineeringwatch.org when they searched the geoengineering term, so they made our site disappear from a search of that term. Again, literally overnight. Remember, those who control the money control the narrative about CV-19, about climate engineering, and countless other critically important issues. One of the biggest COVID-19 related headlines from last week, UK Health Secretary Matthew Hancock revealed on Monday during an update before Parliament that new evidence of a, quote, new strain of the virus that's reportedly spreading more efficiently than earlier known strains. This shouldn't come as any surprise. From the start of the CV19 scenario, Geoengineering warned of ever more virulent versions of CV19 being let loose, an initially slow burn that would be stoked as needed by those who orchestrate from behind the curtain. Bolstering our miraculous immune systems is critically important. It always has been. And this is more true now than ever before. There's numerous essential supplements that can drastically increase our body's own defenses, not just against CV19, but against a long list of other pathogenic elements. And though the medical industrial complex would have us believe otherwise, the science is inarguable. Primary elements are highly absorbable forms of vitamin C, zinc, echinacea, enough iron, but not too much. There are many more. It would seem prudent for all to do their own research to determine what protocol is best for each individual, or consult with a qualified nutritionalist. Acquire appropriate supplements while you can. One final mention on this subject, a key to the equation, vitamin D, which is, in fact, much more than a vitamin, much, much more. In regard to vitamin D levels and our body's potential for natural production, solar radiation management, i.e. climate engineering, by its very design and objective, blocks direct sunlight. The light we do get is an altered light wavelength form. This has known and unknown impacts on the entire web of life, from altering photosynthesis processes to reducing the ability of human beings to produce vitamin D. Without adequate vitamin D levels, a plethora of downstream consequences commences, including a greatly increased susceptibility to CV19. While the legions of radio and TV political pundit talking heads rant about what amounts to nothing more than orchestrated mass distraction, the clock is ticking. The sand in the hourglass is rapidly running out for us all. More on preparations. Proper prioritization is absolutely essential. Consider the totality of what's unfolding. It's not a temporary scenario. Remember that. What are the essentials? Food, shelter, water. Emphasis on the water part. A reliable source of untainted water will soon enough be a must. Those who have water wells, of course, have an advantage, but only as far as they are able to get water out of that hole. Yes, a simple pulley-operated baler can work, but this is extremely limited in its potential. There's now very advanced well pumps that can operate off AC or DC power with a very wide range of voltages. How does this translate? Here's how. If you have the correct well pump, you can run off an AC power source like grid power or a generator, or you can literally unplug from AC and plug directly into DC with no pump wiring changes whatsoever. You can connect the pump wires directly to solar panels with no other components. And on the solar panels, if you're buying solar panels, buy monocrystal panels, because the intense UV radiation is frying not only trees, foliage, insects, plankton, it's also very detrimental to solar panels. It degrades everything. Monocrystal panels last longer. But this example scenario I'm trying to provide on being prepared, just one aspect of being prepared. If you have panels, a proper pump, and a well, you can pump water anytime the sun is shining. A Grundfos SQF pump is one exceptional example of this type of pump. They're off-grid pumps. They're the same ones I use. I've been completely off-grid for 20 years. A Grundfos SQF pump will last likely longer than any of us need to consider, given what's looming on the near-term horizon. There's much more to preparation for what's coming. But here's my point. It is already past time to prepare. Every day counts at this point. And about preparation, let's ask this question. What is the point? Or more correctly, what should be the point of even trying to prepare for what's coming if conditions are going to be so horrific, and they are going to be? Here's the point. The more solid ground we put ourselves on, the more ability we have to assist others as collapse unfolds. Don't we all have a responsibility to do this? To stay at our post, to do our best, to do what is rational and right until we can't? until we're relieved by our Maker. And as dark as the horizon is, it's not over till it's over, as the saying goes. And who can say with any certainty what factors there may yet be in this equation that we can't yet be aware of? Who can say what allies we may yet have which we are not yet aware of? If our collective efforts can tilt the scale in the right direction enough so that some may make it through what's coming, and that some may remember what happened and why, and learn from that, the entire struggle, the entire arduous journey will have been worth every single step. Never give up, ever. Our will can't be taken. In a moment, the latest breaking reports from the front lines on issues that pose the greatest and most immediate threats to all of us, issues on which our collective fate most depends. First, my deepest gratitude and thanks to each and every individual that's doing their best to stay informed, to wake others with credible data from a credible source, and to help turn the tide of insanity. Thank you for your help with sounding the alarm. It's our collective efforts that can yet make a difference. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the Global Alert News Hour, episode number 280, December 19th, 2020. In this broadcast, lots and lots of bad news, but it's critical information, critically important information that covers the issues, again, that we must face if we're to have any chance of altering our current trajectory. This commercial-free frontline news broadcast is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org and paid for by Geoengineeringwatch.org. This news hour is broadcast throughout Northern California on 1670 AM, 104.9 FM, and 105.7 FM, Saturday mornings from 6 to 7 AM. Sunday mornings, same time slot, repeat broadcast on KQMS. That's the largest news talk radio north of Sacramento. The PRN radio network on the East Coast also rebroadcasts Global Alert News Wednesdays, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Recordings of this broadcast can be found at geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent top stories and radio sections. The latest geoengineeringwatch.org awareness-raising materials can be ordered from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for our approximate cost of producing and shipping. Those in the Redding area of Shasta County can pick up free geoengineeringwatch.org materials from the vitamin section at Orchard Nutrition. This includes a limited availability of commercial copies of the 9/11 Architects and Engineers Experts Speak Out documentary about 9/11. If you haven't seen this, it's a must-see. It will move you to the marrow. You will be shocked at what you did not know. Indisputable facts on the event that changed the course of the world and not in the right direction. This powerful ally in the fight to expose and halt climate engineering, GEMFAIR, GEMFAIRE. Every Gym Fair event has a geoengineeringwatch.org awareness-raising booth that supplies free Geoengineering Watch materials to any that attend. If you're attending the event for the purpose of picking up Geoengineering Watch materials, you can get in for free if you tell the Ticketmaster why you're there. Started yesterday, ends tomorrow. Santa Rosa, California, at the Sonoma County Fairgrounds. If you're near that area, please show up, get the materials you need to wake others around you to the extinction level scenarios that are unfolding around us. Help us to sound the alarm. And this announcement on expanding geoengineeringwatch.org radio airtime, a completely new broadcast hour on another Northern California radio station, KCNR, will commence just after the first of the year if all goes as planned. This will begin on Saturday, January 2nd, 2021 from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I will be hosting the geoengineeringwatch.org weekly Global Alert News Q&A hour, a live on-air listener call-in hour. As is the case with the existing weekly Global Alert News broadcast on KQMS, the question and answer hour will be commercial-free, paid for by geoengineeringwatch.org. This will be a very fast-moving one-hour broadcast. Our goal will be to answer as many questions from listeners as is possible in that one-hour time frame. Further, in the first week of 2021, I will host a weekly online geoengineeringwatch.org question and answer hour. More announcements on that to come also. Moving on. Twitter to remove, quote, harmful, misleading, or false information on COVID-19 vaccinations. We all know what that means. It means anything that disputes the official narrative is to be removed. No surprise. Same people own all these social media platforms. On Wednesday, Twitter announced that tweets containing, quote, false or misleading claims about CV-19 vaccinations will be removed. Again, anything that disputes the official narrative, the Orwellian world we live in. More headlines from last week. Multiple sources. Nurse passes out on live TV 10 minutes after taking CV-19 vaccine. Only quoting headlines. Please look it up. From Fox News and other sources, this: Alaska healthcare workers suffer adverse reaction after COVID-19 vaccination. Here's a statement from that report. One woman had an allergic reaction within 10 minutes of receiving the shot. Her name is being withheld after she suffered an anaphylactic reaction that required her to be hospitalized. But this question: do the healthcare workers even have a choice? Consider these next two headlines. From multiple sources, quote, "The jab or your job." And this from multiple sources: COVID-19, take the jab or lose your job. And while many are losing or have already lost their jobs, how's it going for the richest in the country? From Forbes and other sources, this: America's 3 richest people are now positioned to pay 0 state income tax. The rich get richer, and the poor get poorer and sicker. That suits the global elite very well, doesn't it? Many are claiming and concluding that the entire CV-19 scenario is all about profit, but that's not correct. Remember and consider that those at the top of the power pyramid can print as much money as they want from nothing, no collateral. They've done so for a very long time, as I have outlined on this broadcast again and again. This is how the controllers set up the monetary system. What's the CV-19 scenario ultimately about then? The controllers know that our dying planet can no longer support global populations. And about this conclusion, they are mathematically and statistically correct. But to that point, I again ask this: why are we, the vast majority, giving the power structure the right to decide who lives and who dies? To state again for the record, if the human race remains on the current course, no one gets out alive. Not even the controllers. If we the people continue to allow insanity to reign, planetary omnicide will be our near-term destination. Biosphere collapse is the bottom line. When the Earth's life support systems completely collapse, game over. Simple equation. Another headline: Great Reset. 61% of nations have decimated liberty with COVID restrictions. That's certainly true, but again, ultimately, the final reset belongs to nature, and it's underway. From this report, though, an international human rights group has warned that the majority of nations across the globe have implemented COVID-related restrictions that have severely eroded the liberties of their citizens, not just their liberties, but their mental and physical health. And all that serves the power structure very, very well for the reasons I've just cited. They know the planet and its failing life support systems can no longer support populations. And when I hear from people that say, no, that's not true, we could fit all the world's population in the state of Texas, what does that have to do with anything? It's not about elbow room. It's about resources that are needed to survive. The planet's life support systems are collapsing. Fisheries, crop production. Nature has historically provided 75% of all global GDP for free. No longer. Even fish farms, the most toxic element you can eat is a farmed fish, are collapsing because the oceans are superheating, deoxygenating, hypoxic and anoxic zones. Life support systems across the globe, again, collapsing. Not my opinion, statistical, verifiable fact. But even as all this unfolds, those who obediently serve the matrix are doing everything they can to try to secure their spot on the inside circle, thinking that they will preserve their own personal paradigm, which they will be in for a rude awakening on very soon. This headline report from the World Economic Forum, quote, "Private property and privacy will vanish by 2030. And that's not all. Again, statistically and mathematically speaking, if the human race remains on the current course, it's most probable that few, if any, will even be here by that date. So those dates mean nothing. In the meantime, this headline: Mexico's president slams lockdowns as a form of, quote, dictatorship. That's not hard to agree with, is it? It's exactly what it is. And on that note, this headline from last week: Fauci tells Americans not to see their kids for Christmas. And this: Fauci agrees with CNN's Jake Tapper. No Christmas this year. How many people have any idea whatsoever of exactly who, or should I say what, Anthony Fauci is? Here's some recent reports on that subject. Quote, Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., exposes Dr. Anthony Fauci's crooked past. And this, another headline, Dr. Fauci's long criminal history. Let's cover a few more of these because there's so much information out there on Dr. Fauci's dark past. Another headline, Fauci, the greatest criminal fraudster in medical history. These are from multiple sources. They're easily found online. Let's cover a few more. Dr. Fauci engaged in a criminal conspiracy to profit from COVID-19. Here's another one. Shedding light on the dishonorable record of Dr. Fauci. Here's another. Dr. Fauci's dark past brought to light. There's so many of these. Forgive me for covering just a few more. Deep State Dr. Fauci. And another. The untold truth of Dr. Fauci. And one final headline. Just examples. Dr. Anthony Fauci, a new kind of war criminal. And even now, as MSM pushes mainstream media, as they push Fauci as if he has a halo over his head, how many will summon the courage to investigate who and what Fauci actually is? And again, I ask this, is it rational to believe Fauci and crew, like Bill Gates, are actually interested in protecting the health of populations around the world? Is that a reasonable conclusion? So that those populations can continue to proliferate unchecked. Such a scenario is the complete antithesis of what criminals like Fauci and Gates have stated on the record for decades. That their goal is to reduce global populations, not to protect and help to proliferate. Please connect the dots. We must face the truth. Those in power know, again, that the planet's failing life support systems can't support even existing populations, let alone even more human beings. If their motives are not yet clear to you, your eyes are wide shut. Please open them while there's still time to make a difference. You're listening to the commercial-free Global Alert News Weekly Update. More headlines. Let's expand for a moment to the activities of the power structure-controlled military-industrial complex. This headline from last week, quote, cancers, strokes, birth defects. Iraq reportedly plans to sue U.S. over depleted uranium use. Much like Vietnam and Agent Orange that is still killing and deforming people there from birth defects, poisoning the population, the U.S. military-industrial complex has wrought havoc all over the globe. The U.S. military is the biggest single source polluter on planet Earth. These are statistical facts, not my opinion. And when I state these facts, when I present this criticism, many who are thinking dichotomously think this is somehow a condoning of other countries and other militaries. No, absolutely not the case. China's a disaster. Russia's a disaster. Both are completely tyrannical. Governments all over the globe are completely tyrannical at different scales. And that scale is directly proportionate to the size and strength of the military machine involved. And where does that put the U.S.? That question is easy to answer. Now, about those who have tried to report on the criminal actions that are being carried out in the U.S. military. And some people like Pat Tillman couldn't report on it because they were shot in the head by members of our own military, shot 3 times at close range, all his possessions burned, and then a big lie manufactured about Tillman. He was a very intelligent human being, a student of Stoic philosophy, by the way, which is why probably I feel some deep, unknown connection to Pat Tillman and a great reverence for who he was, what he stood for. If you don't know who he is, please research who he is and what happened to him. But there are others, like Julian Assange. Where is he? Where's the patriotism to support Julian Assange for his incredibly courageous attempt to tell the truth? And while the flood of presidential pardons continues, question, what will be the fate of Julian Assange? He's the very definition of a patriot, of courage. Assange has sacrificed everything to tell the truth to the American people. What will be his fate? And he has formally asked the president for a pardon. Will we hear anything about that? Will it be granted? What do you think? His fate is likely to continue rotting away in various forms of incarceration, while, again, ever-increasing numbers of self-serving criminals are given a free pass, a presidential pardon. And it's not just this president or this political party. Not at all. It's business as usual in the pit of moral bankruptcy known as Washington, D.C. More on this theme. Rafael Correa, the U.S. ousted former Ecuadorian president, comments on Venezuela, Julian Assange, and preventing the total destruction of our homeland. Max Blumenthal has interviewed the former Ecuadorian president, Rafael Correa, who was in Venezuela to observe its legislative elections and show support to a government under sustained economic and political attack by the United States. This is business as usual by the empire. Yes, the United States of America is absolutely the definition of an empire and has, over so many decades and with so many countries, crushed them either militarily or economically, rendering them helpless so that the empire could loot, plunder, and pillage their resources and permanently pollute their lands. And whenever in this broadcast, Global Alert News, whenever I provide verifiable information about the crimes of the U.S. government, again, past and present, I receive some scathing messages sent to geoengineeringwatch.org that insist I'm wrong, that America does nothing but good all over the world. The individuals that pin such messages claim that America is only helping other countries. Any such conclusions couldn't be further from the truth, couldn't be further from reality. Under the guise of spreading, quote, freedom and democracy, the criminal cabal known as the U.S. government has brought chaos, carnage, and total collapse to countless countries over, again, many decades. The empire's pursuit of resources has spared none who possessed those resources, starting with oil. And about the so-called humanitarian grants that America supposedly gives to other nations, here's how that generally works. The dictator of a resource-rich country is given a large loan that we are told is for the benefit of the suffering populations in said country. The funds are used by the dictator. The impoverished never see a cent. And then later infusions of funds, again, that is supposedly for the needy, humanitarian grants, we are told, are applied to the back interest of the first loan payoff that again went to the dictator. The sick and dying and oppressed see nothing. That's how it works. And again, as I stated earlier, there are those that automatically conclude that if I justly criticize the completely tyrannical and all too often murderous policies of the U.S. government, that I must be a fan of Russia and China, which of course is absolutely not true. Russia and China, again, are brutally oppressive and criminal regimes. Such is the nature of all governments. They are a form of state-sponsored crime syndicates, and all of them, with very few exceptions, are working together behind the scenes on issues like CV-19 and the climate engineering, aka weather warfare, aka biological warfare assaults, because they know they can no longer support the former paradigm. They can no longer support their populations. On the subject of weather warfare, let's look at winter weather warfare and the resulting weather and temperature whiplash scenarios. As I stated last week, a large manufactured winter scenario was scheduled for the East Coast and has been carried out. The headline from earlier this week was major winter storm to impact portions of Mid-Atlantic and New England. And now this sensationalized headline, which is exactly what the climate engineers wanted to create, is the most recent. Northeast just got hit by a historic snowstorm. Could a white Christmas be next? That's the next potential scheduled winter weather event over the most populated portion of the United States, the most anomalously less warm region in the entire world for the last 8 years running. That is not nature. That is climate engineering and chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. Please research the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org and the engineering drought section and the engineering wildfire sections and the rest of our sections. Please find out what's happening because your future depends on it. In the West, specifically Northern California, the rain deficit continues to build. The climate engineers are radically diminishing and dispersing moisture that enters into the region. The often featureless, hazy, or white canopy skies are telltale signs of the massive climate engineering, aka solar radiation management operations. Yes, we got a bit of rain in the last week, but nothing compared to what we should have. And since 2007, our annual precipitation in the mountainous regions have been dropping precipitously. Even though we may get what appears to be a semi-normal precipitation amount in the areas like Redding, where the precipitation is reported, the orographically enhanced rainfall over the mountainous regions is not occurring, and that's why stream flows are down to such low levels. The Sacramento River is barely flowing, even entering winter. My hydropower generator that once worked and was functional from October through late April or May is now dysfunctional because the streams are almost never flowing anymore. So again, the orographically enhanced rain, which can be 2, 3, even 4 times more than Redding gets, is not occurring, and that's because of the massive saturation of climate engineering particulates in the sky, which create too many condensation nuclei and migrates the moisture further inland. Meteorologists are not reporting on this because their paychecks and pensions depend on them not acknowledging this situation. How long will that continue? Until there's nothing left? We can speculate on the many motives behind the geoengineering operations that have been robbing moisture from the U.S. West for many years, but the fact that the climate engineering, cloud seeding, cloud creation operations are the primary factor that is radically reducing rain over California is absolutely inarguable. The rain-robbing climate engineering operations include extremely powerful microwave transmissions that are used by the climate engineers to manipulate the cloud seeding, cloud formation elements. The transmissions facilitate the more uniform scattering of these toxic atmospheric particulates. For over a decade, geoengineeringwatch.org has emphatically stated on the record that the climate collapse is not as bad as we're being told, it's exponentially worse than we're being told. And we also stated on the record that there would come a time when that fact would be all but impossible to hide, and that time is now starting to unfold. Last week, from multiple sources, this headline, quote, "Global climate data update reveals greater warming than previously estimated." We knew at geoengineeringwatch.org, we knew the data was being falsified to the downside, not the upside. How come the whole of academia didn't know? But they did know. They were simply lying about it, and now they can't hide it any longer. For how long will the ranks of academia betray the human race and the entire web of life, and not just the climate science community, but the medical so-called science community? Some honorable people surfacing from that community, and I salute them. And I hope they band together, stand up, and sound the alarm while they still can. Moving on with more headlines about the imploding life support systems of the planet. This recent headline: sea ice in Antarctica is suddenly plunging from a record high to record lows, baffling scientists. They're baffled because their heads are somewhere where the sun doesn't shine, so that they can, again, retain their paychecks, their pensions, and their personal paradigms for a bit longer while the planet literally implodes. The statistical ice pack in both polar regions has been falsified, along with chemical ice nucleation of the sea surface to create a slush, which is then considered, quote, ice pack, so that they have been able to deceive populations for many years, trying to mask the totality and immediacy of what was unfolding until the last possible moment, and now becoming all but impossible to hide. And what's the climate engineering cabal doing? What is the power structure making them do? Doubling down on their efforts, spraying even more into our skies. And how well that serves the CV-19 scenario, again, not just by blocking direct sunlight, which has a very sterilizing effect on atmospheric and surface pathogens, but it also inflames our respiratory systems, making us much more susceptible to any and every type of pathogen, including CV-19. So many agendas being carried out at once in these arenas, so many. About the runaway climate collapse and global meltdown scenario that's unfolding, again being further fueled by the climate engineering operations, consider this next new headline from livescience.com. A headline that reveals the degree of disinformation coming from so many in the ranks of academia. Here's the headline, quote, "Huge methane cache beneath Arctic could be unlocked by the moon." That's what I said, the moon. What a colossal lie coming from the so-called scientists and so-called experts that our societies are programmed to blindly trust. Blame it on the moon. Blame it on nature. They make it up as they go to cover the tracks of the planetary decimation being wrought by the human race from so many directions, with climate engineering at the top of the list of environmentally destructive human activities. Here's the fact of the matter. For well over a decade, geoengineeringwatch.org has stated on the record that the climate engineering operations were not only trapping more atmospheric heat than they deflected, not only destroying the ozone layer, causing yet more thermal energy buildup on the planet, not only contaminating the entire surface of the planet and every breath we take, but also altering upper-level wind currents, which in turn alters ocean currents, which has long since contributed to warmer ocean currents flowing into the Arctic, which then contributes to the rapidly thawing and releasing formerly frozen methane deposits on the sea floor. And we have so-called science publications like Live Science denying the climate engineering elephant in the sky and blaming the moon for catastrophic methane releases that are by themselves a potential extinction level scenario. From CV19 to climate engineering, in how many ways are so many so-called academicians completely betraying the human race and the entire web of life? We continue to drown in a sea of deception and total insanity. More on that theme from earthmagazine.org, who claims to provide, quote, the science behind the headlines, end quote. Here is their headline. La Nina could set the stage for flu pandemics. Again, more blame it on nature lies. Yes, let's ignore the verifiable data that conclusively proves pathogens are constantly being engineered in hundreds of biolabs all over the world, and let's saddle nature with the blame. And any who buy into this kind of total disinformation, again, have their eyes wide shut. It's the same with all those that cling to the irrational conclusion that current climate and environmental changes, or rather collapses, are just some sort of natural cyclical pattern or process, which is like trying to justify the following argument, which I've cited in the past on this broadcast, that if you found a body that had been shot, stabbed, beaten, run over, burned, poisoned, etc., all of that, and then you claim that the individual died of natural causes, is that rational? Is that logical? It's total idiocy. Moving on, next headline from Reuters and other sources. Record climate disasters in Asia Pacific push millions to breaking point. Chaos, carnage, and mass mortality are very close. Make no mistake about that. It's already underway. From this report, Asia Pacific has faced a record number of climate-related disasters in 2020, affecting tens of millions of vulnerable people already hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. Not by accident, by the way. The Red Cross stated on Wednesday. Cyclone Zazu and Cyclone Yasa both pounded locations in the South Pacific this last week. The weather warfare continues. Given that hurricanes/cyclone modification methods and operations have been ongoing for over 70 years, how is it possible to know what is a result of nature and what is not? The bottom line, the entire climate system has been completely disrupted by climate engineering and countless other forms of human activity. There is no truly natural weather at this point. The entire system has been completely derailed. Next headline from the UK Guardian and other sources. America's last wilderness is about to go to the highest bidder for oil drilling. From that report, tens of thousands of years of undisturbed nature will soon be open to the highest bidder, starting at $25 an acre. And the only ones allowed to bid are those that are a part of the power structure's hydrocarbon producing complex. Consider that those who argue for drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, a place of stunning wild beauty in the far northeast of Alaska, seldom call it what it is, a refuge. Instead, they reduce it to an acronym, ANWR, Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, but it sounds much more sterile as ANWR, doesn't it? They talk about, quote, opening it up as if it's closed. It's not closed. It's public land. They talk about, quote, exploring for oil because that's what they do. They find stuff, they dig it up, they process it, they sell it, then burn it, or eventually throw it away. They talk about drilling in a, quote, environmentally safe manner, without ever mentioning the hundreds of spills in Prudhoe Bay and along the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline, including a massive spill that went undetected for days in that region. They talk about America's, quote, can-do spirit and invoke President Calvin Coolidge, who said, quote, after all, the chief business of the American people is business. Is this making America great again? Trashing the planet to keep the party going just a bit longer? while we ignore the walls collapsing around us, the planet's life support systems? Here's an example of the legacy that the hydrocarbon industry leaves behind. This headline: methane venting from 3 million Montana orphan wells. What's that mean? It means the hydrocarbon industry moves into a region, takes what they can get out of it, trashes it forever, and walks away. And the public is left with that legacy. And that's why the planet is dying. Another headline: most anti-wildlife president in history puts out lame duck rule to gut Species Protection Act. From that report, the new ruling will have devastating consequences for some of America's most iconic species, including the grizzly bear and whooping cranes and Pacific salmon. That's just an excerpt from that report. Another headline report. Another recent report, same theme. Outgoing administration finalizes Shasta Dam raising, the plan to increase water storage. It's hard to find the words to describe the insanity we are drowning in. Raising a dam that can't be filled already due to the cutting off of precipitation by the government's own weather warfare operations. From that report, California Congressman Kevin McCarthy stated this, quote, "This project is a win all around," he said. He further stated this: "I want to commend Secretary Bernard and Commissioner Berman for continuing to prioritize this project despite ongoing and misguided opposition from Sacramento bureaucrats and some elected officials from California." Congressman Kevin McCarthy then went on to say this, quote, "The Trump administration has taken many actions to improve the lives of Californians by pursuing policies to help our communities get the water that we contract and pay for, and we are grateful," end quote. Again, from Congressman McCarthy. "No, I'm not grateful. Though Lake Shasta is literally in my backyard, and raising the dam over 18 feet would bring the lake even closer. Why would I, or any rational individual, be grateful for the proposal of raising a dam in a twisted attempt to compensate for our own government's ongoing all-out toxic weather warfare assault that's cutting off the flow of desperately needed rain to the North State in the first place? Because of climate engineering's drought-causing effects, they can't even fill the dam at its existing height right now, and somehow raising it will fix everything? Will raising the Shasta Dam save the drought-stricken and dying-by-the-day forests throughout Northern California? I confronted Congressman Doug LaMalfa face-to-face about this exact issue about 5 years ago, about the dam raising ridiculousness and climate engineering. Congressman LaMalfa pretended not to know about the climate engineering operations during the confrontation mentioned, which was a lie on his part, as I had already had about a half dozen face-to-face meetings with Congressman LaMalfa and his staff on the subject of climate engineering. On film and on the record, Congressman LaMalfa claimed he would investigate the climate engineering issue if I could supply him with testing data from a, quote, credible source to confirm the contamination. This was LaMalfa's attempt to duck the dozens of state-certified lab tests he had already been given by geoengineeringwatch.org. Also on film and on the record, I served up LaMalfa and his staff testing data from California EPA that confirmed aluminum contamination in streams and waterways. Did Congressman LaMalfa ever lift a finger to keep his word? Answer: no. Congressman LaMalfa continues to turn two blind eyes to the critical issue of climate engineering to this day. If you want to see it on film and on the record, search geoengineeringwatch.org, confronting a congressman about the climate engineering issue. Watch and decide for yourself from that video. For the record, the Shasta Dam project will never happen. Collapse will come long before this project can even get off the ground. Wait and see. Another headline from casino.org. Quote, will Las Vegas run out of water? Short answer, yes. If climate engineering operations are allowed to continue, Las Vegas and countless other urban areas will soon run out of water. And in the case of Las Vegas, they're a stone throw away from America's largest dam, Hoover Dam. How much good is that dam doing them? With climate engineering operations completely disrupting the hydrological cycle, i.e. the rain, the size of the dam in question is virtually meaningless. Another headline from last week, 6 Arizona counties may be uninhabitable in next 30 years due to climate change, study shows. Again, more betrayal from academia, denying the climate engineering elephant in the sky, which is the single greatest rain-reducing factor on the planet of all. It must rain more on a warming planet, must rain more overall. 7% more moisture for every degree C of warming. That is not happening. We are likely past 3.5 degrees C already. The factor that is reducing overall global rainfall is climate engineering, and the whole of academia is in criminal denial of that fact. From the New York Times and other sources, quote, "They're among the world's oldest living things. The climate crisis is killing them." From that report, California's redwoods, sequoias, and Joshua trees define the American West and nature's resilience through the ages. Wildfires this year were their deadliest test. No, climate engineering is their deadliest test, which is the single greatest causal factor for the wildfires. Again, more deception from academia. The single greatest factor that is establishing the conditions for the epic wildfires is climate engineering. Regardless of the source of ignition, that's a separate subject. What's establishing the conditions for these epic burndowns is climate engineering. Please search the engineering wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Read through that entire section and you will understand the degree to which we are under assault. Another headline from CNBC and numerous other sources, a $7 trillion climate change warning to the stock market from its biggest shareholder. From that report, BlackRock, which has a significant influence on proxy battles against corporations, signaled this week it would support more shareholder resolutions on issues including climate change. Again, complete ignoring of the climate engineering issue, which is what the power structure has used to mask the severity of what's unfolding from the population until this point, while simultaneously destroying the Earth's life support systems and contaminating every breath we take, with many other ramifications, many already mentioned in this broadcast. The reality of what's unfolding is sinking in. It's becoming ever more impossible to hide. There is an existential tidal wave above our collective heads, and that tidal wave is about to crash. BlackRock and other money-manipulating criminal cabals like them are likely neck deep in their involvement with the behind-the-scenes climate engineering entities and funding of those entities. All are increasingly being forced to face the fact that the climate engineering insanity is not slowing the overall runaway climate collapse. No, geoengineering solar radiation management operations are in fact further fueling the overall planetary meltdown and climate and biosphere collapse. Short-term, highly toxic cooldowns at the cost of an ever-worsening overall warming. Consider this quote from Adolf Hitler, appropriate with all these subject matters to consider. "The greater the crime perpetrated by the leadership, the less likely it is that people will ever believe their leaders to be capable of perpetrating such an event." Think about that. Stop and think about it. Those who control the money printing completely control the narrative. The money printers control every single individual that has prioritized their paycheck and pension over their honor, their morality, their virtue, and over telling the truth. Sadly and shockingly, the percentage of such individuals in the ranks of the human race is legion. Such individuals line the halls of so-called media, of academia, of the medical industrial complex, of the military industrial complex. Sadly, the honorless comprise the vast majority of so-called elected officials. Are the character traits I previously mentioned taught in our schools as being the most important building blocks of life, of being a human being? We all know the answer to that question. It's a resounding no. For far too long, our societies, with few exceptions, have trained, taught, and programmed our children to be part of the hive mind, to be a conforming brick in the wall. Our children are taught that the truth is what the system says it is, what the money printers say it is. And again, they control the narrative. They always have, with few exceptions, because sadly, the ranks of the human race are well stocked with the morally bankrupt. The power structure dictated programming continues at an ever more accelerating and intense rate through the university level. Societies are taught and trained to blindly obey the so-called experts, to blindly worship their degree that has been issued by the matrix-controlled universities. But is this certificate of power structure university training anything other than a certificate of indoctrination? given the fact that those who control the money, again, who control the narrative, also control the curriculum in the so-called higher education system. I'm not in any way anti-education. To the contrary, I have spent so much of my life deep in study, trying to learn and absorb everything I could from every source of information I could find. But I ask this question: education with what agendas? In the matrix-controlled curriculum, with what ultimate objectives by those who control the system? Education to what end? If all the matrix-trained so-called experts are telling the truth, are adhering to the truth, then how is it that almost the entirety of the human race is completely oblivious to the fact that we, as the dominant species on this once thriving planet, are facing extremely near-term extinction and probable planetary omnicide because of our own actions? We are collectively staring directly at the lights of the oncoming train of climate and environmental collapse, which has radically accelerated power structure desperation and related actions. And the vast majority, even now, are unwilling to even face the truth, let alone admit to it. And God forbid actually take any action to turn the tide. Consider the following quote that is attributed to one of the Rothschilds, the central banking figures for centuries. He's attributed as saying this: "Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws. Those who print the money make the laws." Question: is it reasonable or rational to blindly embrace the completely experimental vaccine concoction that's being dished out by the criminal cabal masquerading as a legitimate government and the medical industrial complex co-conspirators? And how many are even now trying to convince themselves that all the actors just named are just trying to help them? That's Stockholm Syndrome on steroids. All governments are corrupt to various degrees. Consider this quote by Maya Angelou, who stated, "Courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage you can't practice any other virtue consistently. You can practice any virtue erratically, but nothing consistently without courage." And what's the antithesis of courage? Willfully blind and unquestioning conformity. More weather warfare headlines from last week. South Africa considers, quote, dimming the sun to avoid running out of water. From that report, with the climate crisis tightening its grip on our planet, the chances of dry spells hitting Cape Town, South Africa will triple by 2100. We won't be here anywhere near that amount of time on this course. But the report states, this is according to new research. The researchers also suggested that injecting particles into Earth's atmosphere above Cape Town could help remedy this situation. This is insanity. Of course it's going on. Those that aren't clinically blind can see this. No offense to the clinically blind. How long can this insanity continue to expand and manifest before the human race is willing to face the truth? This from Leo Tolstoy. His awakening to the reality of corrupt powers is a reflection in this quote. He said, "The truth is that the state is a conspiracy designed not only to exploit, but above all to corrupt its citizens. Henceforth," Tolstoy stated, "I shall never serve any government anywhere." Something to consider at this time. Another headline that's a red flag harbinger of why the filth being sprayed into our skies isn't being reported. From thehill.com, GAO, Government Accounting Agency, finds lack of funding, aging equipment, plague national air pollution monitoring system. The report says years of budget cuts have left the U.S. air pollution monitoring system in a state of disrepair, according to a report from, again, Government Accountability Office. The network of more than 4,000 sites has been in use since the 1970s, but officials said the system is deteriorating, making it difficult to track poor air quality. That's by design. The system is designed not to tell you about the threat. I've stated this over and over and over. I know this from firsthand experience, from high-level closed-door meetings at California EPA arranged by congressional reps, told to my face the entire system is rigged. They don't even look for the kind of particulates that are being spewed into our skies, let alone report on it. Nothing comes close to being able to report on the nanoparticulates, and they certainly aren't looking for these elements: aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese, all of it raining down on all of us, being absorbed by the entire web of life, and academia continues to betray us on this issue. Will the disaster capitalists try to profit from what's unfolding from the climate engineering assault as the ship goes down, the proverbial pirates filling their pockets with loot as they're neck deep on a sinking ship? Yes, that's how they behave. On that subject, from Newsmax Finance, Metals.com. California water futures begin trading amid fear of scarcity. The bombardment of atmospheric particulates is completely derailing California's precipitation, and there are those that are doing everything they can to profit from it. And what are our so-called elected officials doing while all this is occurring? They're denying the climate engineering issue, which is decimating the very population that they claim to represent. Again, search geoengineeringwatch.org, confronting a congressman on climate engineering, for a stunning example of the sort of behavior that we are seeing from our so-called elected officials. Another headline from the UK Guardian: international lawyers' draft plan to criminalize ecosystem destruction. Is exposing and stopping climate engineering a part of their plan? What do you think? Of course not. All of these actions are designed to pacify environmental communities and so-called environmental organizations, but they won't touch climate engineering because their 501c3 nonprofit depends on them not admitting to climate engineering. So all the while, the ship continues to go down with the hypocritical behavior of those in the so-called environmentalist organizations. Another recent headline from several Southern Hemisphere sources, quote, geoengineering the ocean could help slow climate change. Could, may, might, as if it hasn't been going on forever. And the particulates that are dispersed over the oceans as part of solar radiation management are being used also for ocean fertilization to produce plankton blooms to suck up even more carbon, making the oceans even more acidic with even less oxygen retention, superheating them even more, killing the oceans even faster, and thus killing all of us even faster. And we have all these so-called scientific sources pretending that all of this is just a proposal. How is it possible to get one's arms around this level of societal insanity? And when I now walk through the definitely silent forests where I live that were once thriving only a few years ago, it makes me want to put on a pack and march deep into the wilderness that I love so much and have frequented over so many years, and pitch a tent and never look back. But I can't do this. My conscience will not let me. I don't own my life. I owe it to the whole. And I will fight to salvage anything from this miracle planet until my absolute last breath. Every creature, every tree, every insect that is fighting to survive is depending on us to fight with them. They have no voice except for us. When they die, we will die. A final headline of insanity in this week's extended Global Alert News broadcast. The big push for nukes in space. That's the headline. Last week, a SpaceX rocket exploded in a fireball on the SpaceX site in Texas. Elon Musk, founder and CEO of SpaceX, has been touting the detonation of nuclear bombs on Mars. He says he can, quote, transform it into an Earth-like planet, end quote. It's been projected that the Musk plan would take more than 10,000 nuclear bombs detonated on Mars to make it livable like Earth. The nuclear bomb explosions would also render Mars completely radioactive. The nuclear bombs, according to the Musk plan, would be carried on a fleet of 1,000 starships that Musk wants to build, like the one that blew up this week. SpaceX is selling T-shirts that state on them, "Nuke Mars." Let's stand back for just a moment to ponder the level of insanity that we are living in. Musk, one of the richest people in the world that has gotten much richer since the CV-19 scenario, an individual that is greatly contributing to the overall decimation and death of the existing planet, is going to magically make Mars habitable by sending 1,000 magical starships, which seem to be blowing up on the launching pads, to Mars to detonate 10,000 nuclear bombs to make Mars the new Eden. It's total insanity. It's impossible to even get our arms around this. We are living in a planetary asylum. Einstein is credited as defining insanity as, quote, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. The notion that we can cure the ills brought on by harmful technologies used in a very destructive and deadly way by applying yet more harmful technology is indeed insanity. For the on-air listeners of this broadcast, an extended version of today's broadcast is available at geoengineeringwatch.org. Yes, we are living in a planetary asylum that spins further out of control by the day, but we must not allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by that which surrounds us. Always, we must remember and focus on what is within our control, on what actions and leaps in the right direction that we can all make, if we would only choose to do so. A critical mass of awareness in the population must be reached. This is the first and most critical step that could alter our current course. Every single individual that our collective efforts help to awaken matters in ways that we cannot yet fully know or understand. All are needed in the desperate endeavor to sow the seeds of awareness. See the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to learn more about how you can help to sound the alarm. Share credible data from a credible source. Make your voice heard. Make every day count. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington with geoengineeringwatch.org.